On this episode of the Star Trek Universe podcast, without the safety of a net or a recent rewatch, we are ranking the Star Trek movies. It's going to be fun.
All that right after this. Welcome to the Star Trek Universe podcast. My name is Matthew Carroll.
Hi, I'm David C. Robertson.
Oh man, I am so nervous about this episode, my friend.
What are you nervous about, man? I'm excited.
I feel like I'm going to put my ever-loving foot in my mouth.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, okay, so here's what we're doing today. We want to rank the movies. Mm-hmm. Dave has seen all the movies way more times than I have.
Yeah,
and is just generally way more knowledgeable about Star Trek than I am. I love it, but I'm not a big rewatcher. I tend to watch things once every 10 years. And so I literally haven't seen a Star Trek movie in 10 years, I think. I think I sat down to watch Wrath of Khan maybe 6 years ago or something. It's been a while.
Well, the movies have been released in the last 10 years, so it's at least been...
I haven't rewatched in the last 10 years. I have seen all of them as they've come out, but even then, I only saw Beyond once. I only saw Into Darkness once. So I feel like I'm going in really unprepared, and I feel like I'm going to embarrass myself. And so please give me as much shit as you want to, Internet, for my rankings. I mean, it's subjective, but, I'm probably wrong.
Yeah. And in the interest of full disclosure, we have been talking about doing this episode for, 7 months. So
that's true.
I was just in the mood the other day to kind of throw the Abrams movies on in the background and plowed through all three of them. So I kind of had an inadvertent rewatch of all three of those movies.
Right. And that's rad. That's rad. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our worst. We're going to go through the 13 movies from worst to best, discuss the reasons we chose our worst, and, as we go, we'll I'm sure we'll have some overlap. I don't know. It's 13 movies. I can't imagine we're going to be on the same page from front to back for sure, but there might be some similarities in there. Mm-hmm. There's weird things like the 2009 Star Trek. It could go so many places for so many people. We do these kind of ranking episodes on the MCU cast all the time, and a lot of times me and Jeff end up with similar lists. There'll be a few differences here and there, but this is, I feel, just it's so many things, and they're so subjective.
Yeah. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to do this episode, and then over the course of X amount of time, we're going to review each individual movie with the deep dive.
That's the game plan. And
then come back at the end of all of that and do a new ranking.
That's right. And when we do that ranking episode, we're going to have this ranking episode to refer back to see how what we think. So I think that it'll be really interesting to see how they change with a current rewatch.
I would say mostly in my teenage years is when I watched most of these movies. And now there's so much to watch. You don't have time to read. I used to just throw Star Trek movies on in the background and just run them constantly.
Yeah, remember when there was just only a few things you liked?
Yeah. And
there's just a few shows that are my shows that I rewatch over and over. And these days it's there's way too much good stuff to watch to even get through it once, much less rewatch things.
So, I at about 2002 is when I kind of fell off of being, which worked for a while because that was the last Star Trek movie for a really long time. So all through college, I didn't really watch Star Trek movies because there weren't any, and I was too busy doing other things.
Yeah.
Not having a social life, watching Buffy.
Yeah, exactly. I was saying that Star Trek just became Buffy. Yeah, that's what we watched after that. So, speaking of 2002, you want to get to our lists?
Oh, damn. I gotta get the feeling that we're on the same page here.
Yeah, I think we might be. All right. So
at least for this first one.
Given all those caveats that we are very much, this is going to be this is a thrown together thing that we're just given our impressions based on long ago rewatches or even first watches. I think I've only seen the motion picture once.
Oh, wow.
All the way through.
Crazy.
I've seen bits of it over the years, like when it's like been on TV and stuff, but it's not one they replay a lot. And so anyway, so there's some of these I probably have only seen once from beginning to end, which is insane.
I've seen 3 versions of it, like at least 7 or 8 times.
Yep, I know. So that's what I'm saying. Dave is. What I'm really doing is I'm lowering everyone's expectations of my rankings, and I'm increasing their expectations of yours.
I know, and that's how you're going to win somehow. I didn't even know we were in competition. But.
Like, this wasn't supposed to be a competitive thing, but I guess it is. Okay, let's go with number 13. Sounds like we have the same one. Star Trek Nemesis.
Star Trek Nemesis is my least favorite. Yes. Can I just say I love all these movies. I love all of the Star Trek movies. I really do.
Cool.
I don't love every bit of them, and I'll still give them shit. But I do enjoy every one of them on some level.
Yeah, they're all a mixed bag. Like, they all have good and bad things, and they all have, and the other thing, they're so subjective because a lot of them it's about personal experience. Like, where were we? What did this movie mean to us when it happened?
Yeah.
So I'm totally with you. I do love all the Star Trek movies in some way. I think except for Nemesis.
Yeah,
I can't think of much redeeming about it. Nemesis. Please try to redeem it in my mind while you're also putting it at 13.
Yeah.
To me, this has very little redeeming value.
I do always like the idea. I want to be very careful about how I put this. I like the idea of nature versus nurture. I like the idea that Picard could grow up in the dilithium mines on Romulus and turn into a murderous psychopath.
Yeah, I like that too.
Who mind rapes women. All right. I think that's an interesting concept. I just disliked pretty much the entire execution of Nemesis. I feel like it was a bad call to bring Stuart Baird in, a guy who knows nothing about Star Trek, a guy who doesn't care about Star Trek, clearly, because they're like, oh, we need fresh blood. No, he didn't need that fresh blood. I'm sorry, he didn't.
Right. Is he the director?
Yeah, he was the director, and I can't remember if he had ever directed. I think he'd, co-directed something. I think he was, the assistant director on U.S. Marshals or something like that.
Right. So this is an interesting thing to talk about, because I feel like Nemesis is guilty of kind of the worst sins of what's bad about a Star Trek movie to me. Mm-hmm. And it's weird because to me, it's kind of embodied in the 2009 version of Star Trek, although that's much higher on my list. So to me, Star Trek, it's kind of like this list is going to be somewhat informed by the fact that to me, Star Trek is about moral choices. Mm-hmm. But the problem is you can't have a movie just be about moral choices. I mean, you can, obviously, but it's not going to be an action blockbuster. So somehow translating that, what is great about the show, which is these character choices, to me, that's what's, to me, is great about Star Trek. They put the people in a world, in a science fiction scenario, and then they have to make choices that are always interesting when they're done right. Mm-hmm. And that sort of deliberativeness doesn't work on the big screen as well, so they always have to make the movies somehow bigger and more exciting. And how they achieve that, to me, is often what is good or bad. So I have a delineation in my list where it's some of the movies feel like big expanded episodes, and I actually kind of like that. They're just big expanded episodes.
Yeah, I don't mind that necessarily.
Others of them really try to expound on what Star Trek is and sometimes to really good effect, and sometimes to really silly effect. And I think that Nemesis is the silliest. It just feels it feels silly in all the wrong ways. It's like, well, what do we need Picard to fight?
Yeah,
An evil younger Picard who's in the head of the Romulan Empire. Like that's it. I don't know. It feels weird. It doesn't feel natural to me.
There are some nice little moments where like they're talking about like, oh yeah, at the Beta Z wedding, we're all going to be naked, and Picard's like, I have to hit the gym, you know. Okay, that's all kind of cute and fun, but then you have like sort of off-color stuff that doesn't seem like those characters, like Picard calling Riker Mr. Troy.
Which that joke has not aged well, because now we're living in a world in 2019 where, you know, it's not uncommon or weird for a man to take his wife's name. And now in that movie, it was a total joke.
There's a lot of different things going on. You have a director who didn't care about Star Trek, know about Star Trek in any real way, and it could be argued doesn't really know anything about directing. Or doesn't know a lot about it anyway. Then you had a writer, John Logan, who wrote Gladiator, which is why all of us Trekkies were really super excited about it when he was, attached to write it. Because he wrote Gladiator, and then he's doing the Romulans, and he's a big fan. But what he wound up writing with Brent Spiner, no less, was just something that wound up being completely so hackneyed fan service that it felt disingenuous, like to absent friends. That line when after Data sacrificed himself and they're toasting to him, that's straight out of Star Trek 3 when they're talking about Spock. They're absent friends, which is, I think, a naval thing. But anyway, still, they just tried to hit a lot of the same story beats that Wrath of Khan and or Search for Spock had already hit. And clearly, Brent Spiner was all about it with like, oh, I'm too old to play Data. Okay, well,
obviously not.
Yeah, and I'm going to continue, waving the flag of, you guys in that episode Inheritance said he had an aging chip. It's so annoying to me that no one on staff could just say that and be like, hey guys, remember?
Yeah, that is really annoying. So the thing that the hope I have for Nemesis, and the thing that. Let me say the bad thing before I say the good thing.
Okay.
The bad thing, probably my least favorite scene in this movie is when I think it's Riker jumps under the ship with like a Reman. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
A Reman, and like
so
has
stupid.
some weird action sequence under it was just so there's so much contrived bullshit in this movie. Now, great opening scene. When the Romulan High Council's killed or whatever, it's a really cool assassination moment.
Yeah, love Dina Meyer too. By the way, Dina Meyer is the lady Romulan that was in the movie.
Huh, neat. Okay,
who comes to their rescue against the Scimitar.
There's some good stuff in there, but it overall, like you said, it feels like fan fiction or something.
It does.
It really does. That's it feels like fan fiction, and it feels like it was written to be an action movie, and especially as these actors are getting older, making it an action movie is just the wrong call. It should have been more of a deliberative love letter to Star Trek that was about them, getting older, making, what a lot of the best Star Trek movies are about. They're action movies, but they're not action movies. They don't send well, okay, maybe they do. They don't necessarily send the old actors down to have a fist fight. Sometimes they do.
Right.
But often it's like they have to win with logic or win with Kirk, acting or tricking the god or whatever. There's a lot of cool ways they end the stories, and it's very rarely having a fight in the belly of the ship.
But there's a very specific thing, and I feel like there's no real reason for Riker to be running around fighting the Picard clones #1, essentially.
Yeah. Oh god, it's so silly when you say it. I don't think we'd ever met the Remans, they were in books right before this movie.
Yeah, they in like the Rihansu books, they just looked like they were like a lower caste in the Romulan society, but they lived on Remus, not Romulus.
Right, and that's the other thing is like in this movie they made them look like orcs,
right? Which
is another just really silly trope.
Yeah, and also it doesn't make any sense scientifically, like that the entire world is in shadow. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know that. It would have to hit the sun at some point.
It depends. If you're tidally locked with the planet, and you're always on the opposite side of the planet from the sun, that could work.
I don't know. I've seen a lot of Trekkie dissertations about how that's impossible.
Anyway, so Nemesis, let's get past it. What I was going to say is the hope I have for Nemesis is that the new Picard series seems like it's drawing from Nemesis. And very much like in the MCU after Endgame, people are like, oh, that kind of salvaged some of the Dark World. Thor. Maybe this Picard series will be so good that we'll look back on Nemesis and see how it was laying the groundwork for great character stuff to happen in Picard, you know?
Mm-hmm. And there are things that I liked about Nemesis. The Dune buggy chase was not one of them.
Oh, so bad. And just B4 existing.
I don't mind B4 existing.
I do. I don't like it in the fact that it just was such an obvious.
It's Spock and the Katra.
Yeah, it's Spock. It's such an obvious Spock and the Katra moment, and I
hate all of that. I
hate it. Hate it. Okay,
it's so annoying.
We hate Nemesis. Let's move on.
I don't hate it.
Okay,
there's stuff enjoy.
I hate Nemesis, and I might hate my number 12 as well.
Oh, okay. What's your number 12?
My number 12 is the motion picture.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty far down the list there.
All right, well, let's not do another Nemesis. Just give a brief rundown of why you hate the motion picture.
It is just boring as hell. And you've told me I should watch the other versions. There's different versions, and it's in the rewatch. I will watch whatever version you tell me to watch.
I specifically think you need to watch the Robert Wise's director's edition, which still hasn't been released in HD or on Blu-ray, but I do have the DVD special edition.
Okay.
But I mean, you're not going to be sated. It's still boring. It will still be boring to you, I should say.
Right.
And, a lot of people say, there's a reason they call it the motionless picture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying it's much shorter.
That's good.
And they fix some of the special effects.
That's good. Yeah, it doesn't feel, I don't care. I've seen it a couple of times. Mm-hmm. I've seen it once for sure all the way through because I did sit down to watch it and endeavored to finish it. But I don't care. There's nothing very memorable to me in that movie. And it just doesn't feel, the most interesting thing is what they did with like the Borg in those William Shatner books. Like the fact that it was prepared by the Borg. That's the best thing I remember about V'ger. Yeah. So anyway, that's my number 12. What's your number 12?
Star Trek Insurrection.
Oh, interesting. That's much higher on my list.
Yeah, I have no interest in F. Murray Abraham and his crew of plastic surgery addicts. I am bothered by like how much good whatever this radiation is on the planet, how much good it could do for like everyone.
Right.
And they are like, screw the needs of the many. We're doing this. And I don't understand why those people had to be like moved. Like to me, the plot doesn't make sense. Like the premise doesn't make sense. Like I don't understand why we have the Federation doing what they shouldn't do. I understand that's why there needs to be an insurrection. I'll get to something else here in a minute, but I understand all of that, but they never adequately convinced me of why they had to remove and displace this group of 600 people.
Right. It does feel a little strange because it's basically, if you're going by the logic of Spock, the needs of the many should outweigh the needs of the few. So the needs of the galaxy that could be helped by this, whatever this radiation is, should outweigh. And it'd be one thing if it was like their planet, but they're also just a spacefaring race who found this planet, right? Isn't that the rules of the, what happened? They found it, so you think they're just like they just found this planet and stayed there because of the radiation.
Right.
And it does, I definitely could go with you on that the plot doesn't make sense. But for
like,
me,
we were once like you.
We'll get to where it is on in my ranking, but for me, this just feels like an expanded episode.
It feels like an expanded episode, but one that's not particularly clever. Like, I side with Admiral Forrest in a lot of ways. I don't understand the need to remove the people.
Yeah, I think that is a problem with that movie, that they don't do a good job of explaining how the radiation works, why in everything else in Star Trek is like bottleable and synthesizable, but for some reason this isn't. And they don't even talk about trying. Like, it just seems like there are things they could try to figure out.
I'll tell you the most damning thing, and this movie just perfectly personifies it in a way that all the other Star Trek movies have done it, really, in a lot of ways, but the square one-ing of Data. Because they're like, oh, well, we had to take out his motion chip so he could do this mission. And so he is like, one of the coolest things about the movies is in Generations, he started using the emotion chip. He went through an entire movie, and that was maybe one of the best parts of that movie was him going through the process of learning to control his emotions. In Generations, we got a little closer with the humanization of Data, where he's tempted in the bowels of the ship. He even had partial human flesh, but instead of taking that further, they can't regenerate flesh for that poor kid. Instead of taking it further, they turn him all the way back to like season 2 Data. And I say season 2 Data because season 1 Data smirked and chuckled and stuff, but
right.
But they took him. He's like walking around talking to this kid like, I have never played. How do you play? You had an entire ship full of kids. You're telling me that in all of that navel gazing on board the Enterprise, you never once talked to a kid about how to play?
Yeah. That is silly.
It is ridiculous.
That is one that, again, I haven't seen it since I think I may have seen it once since it came out, but it's not one that I've rewatched many times. So that'll be an interesting one to go back and revisit.
So yeah, I have and of course it just like followed the formula of First Contact and made Picard the action hero again, running around shooting things. And
yeah, at least it gave it a little more reason with the whole radiation making him stronger and better.
A little bit.
At least there's a little bit of a sci-fi reason there, instead of him being like this deliberative, very like captainly captain all these years, and then suddenly he's running around fighting the Borg.
And I'll tell you
with
this.
Weapons.
This is I think the first movie where they went totally digital on the starships, and it shows.
I bet
it looks rough, and the worst part of it is in the action sequence at the end. He's running around this thing, and this like tapestry of whatever the hell it was supposed to be. I guess like a solar sail soaking up the radiation or whatever. Like they've got these beams and everything, and then just behind it, it's just blue screen. They never fixed it, or I don't know if they were planning on fixing it, but it just looks like he's running around against blue screen that they just never did anything with.
Wow, that's rough. That's really rough.
Bad. Insurrection's rough, man. Rough.
All right. Well, let's get to our number 11s.
All right.
I have Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
I have Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
What? I was like, oh man, we're already off of each other. We're never going to sync up on anything again. But no, we do. Number 5, Final Frontier. Tell us all about it. What do you think?
There are elements, there are big chunks of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier that I love dearly. I really do. I love them. The trio, the triumvirate sitting around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and eating beans that bones made with Tennessee whiskey. I love all of that. I hate some of the ham-fisted humor. Like stuff that doesn't make sense. And that's, I think, the biggest problem. And I know a lot of Trekkies will say, "Oh, to try to go and meet God," and that's like the thing that they bring up. Go back and look at the original series. They met a couple of different versions of supernatural deities in our past. So that's not the big issue. Not really. The worst thing is, aside from little weird continuity errors and some dodgy special effects,
is the fan dance.
You know what? Not even that. Like, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. But that is like a branching off or a segment of what I'm talking about. Like the dumbing down of certain characters. Like, I think they did a fantastic job with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Those characters are treated with so much dignity in that movie. They have their little snipey comments between each other, but it's fantastic. But we have Scotty saying he knows the ship like the back of his hand, and then like running into a beam and passing out. You have Uhura's fan dance, where she's like a 60-year-old woman dancing around naked on the sand. You have, at the beginning of the movie, Chekhov and Sulu, who are lost. The navigator and the helmsman are lost in the woods and are too stupid to realize that Uhura is going to be able to look at the sensors and tell that they're not caught in a blizzard as they claim. Like, it's just stupid, ham-fisted humor. Like, and yeah, you could throw in Spock's "be one with the horse, Captain" comment, because Spock told him, or they were talking about being one with the mountain as he was climbing El Capitan.
Yeah.
I liked that. I liked that bit. That was a funny little line. I loved McCoy watching them from the ground, cursing and complaining that he's going to start talking to himself, because clearly he's already talking to himself. I love all that stuff. But once you get into like just like making the other characters borderline mentally challenged, when we've seen them work miracles in all the previous Star Treks, just for the sake of a joke, I don't care for that. But I love Sybok. I thought he was a really cool addition, and I have no problem with him being a secret brother. Why would Spock mention Sybok?
Right.
He wouldn't. I like all of that. And I like the god of Shakari. I like that, it's a powerful alien creature that was banished, or, we don't get a lot of information on him. And I think the movie turned out way better than it should have been, for all of the problems, the financial burdens, and all the story problems that went through. So, yeah, there's a lot to, there is a lot of improvement that could go into Final Frontier, but there's also a lot to love, I think.
Yeah. I need to see it again, but I just remember, similarly to Nemesis, just thinking it had a lot of silly stuff in there that didn't really fit what I wanted from a Star Trek movie, for sure.
And they shoehorned that in. Like, Shatner wanted a much darker, and everyone blames William Shatner for being a bad director, but the fact of the matter is, and I don't like what he was originally going to do, he wanted a darker, more humorless movie. He essentially wanted instead of it being an alien world, he wanted it to be straight up hell.
Interesting. Which is that's not a great idea either, for
in some ways,
for this world. But yeah, I think it's interesting. All right, let's move on to the next one. And with this next one, let's try to pick up the speed, because we are 30 minutes in and 3 movies
I know.
And I want to talk about every one of them, but I also we're going to do a deep dive on every one of these starting very soon.
Well, I feel like, the worse they are, the more explanation you have to have for why they're in such a poor place.
Yeah, that's true. Especially, like you said, you love them all. There's some on here that I'm willing to be like, yeah, that's just bad. It's bad.
Yeah. I will quote all of them gleefully.
And I think we're getting to the point where I don't feel that way anymore. The rest of these, I think, have more defensible stuff to them, to me. Which, number 10 for me is Into Darkness.
Me too.
What? Yeah,
that's crazy.
We'd like a sound effect or a bell or something for that when we sync up.
Remember, like, we had, like, episode 2 or whatever, and you kept going, ding, ding. And I was like, you've never said that to me, and it's creepy as shit. Why are you going, ding, ding?
I don't remember that. That's pretty good, though. Let's bring it back. Ding,
my wife was
ding.
seriously even listening to the show, and she goes, why does Matt keep going, ding, ding? And I'm like, I don't know.
You know,
I have known you for so many years. Man. We've never known you to do it.
Matt evolves. Matt evolves.
Yeah, if that's what you want to call it.
The Matt evolves. All right. So Into Darkness. This, as I was saying earlier, things that just feel they have to blow it up and do something different than an episode. And sometimes it feels good, and sometimes it doesn't. And this one again just feels like. It always feels bad when they feel like they're making fan fiction, and this one again feels very much like fan fiction. Like the whole reversing, and I know it's not that big of a part of the movie, but it is kind of the big climactic moment when they reverse the big speech between Kirk and Spock. I just was like, why?
Yeah, I appreciate what they were going for, and it was seeing that at the beginning of or relatively at the beginning of their relationship, rather than further toward the end I appreciate it, and for the different reasons, and I get it, but
yeah. It's just a totally different thing.
One of the promises of the Abrams films was, there would be fan service, but also this is supposed to be something that opens it up for a general audience. And I feel like this movie really fails on that point, because
for sure.
To appreciate it, you had to have seen Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Because they even do like a big reveal of him, my name is Khan.
Yeah.
No one knows who that is.
Exactly. And that's the other big problem. Even Kirk doesn't know who that is, because he doesn't have the history with Khan that he had in Space Seed. So, like, the whole plot of this movie is a lot more meaningless. He's just another bad guy to face,
Right. And the plot is meaningless for the general audience, who I thought these movies were geared towards, because they haven't seen Wrath of Khan. They don't know about that. So they're like, well, who is that supposed to be? Is that like a guy? You could just hear someone looking at their significant other and going, was that somebody in the old stuff?
Or did I miss that character at the beginning of the movie? Like, have they talked about Khan? Again, that's the thing, that you could have introduced that, but they were so... It's J.J. Abrams and his mystery boxes. Like,
yep, I was about to say that. That's like one of the major downfalls of J.J. Abrams' mystery boxes.
It's like you're wondering who... What was his name for the first half of the movie?
John Harrison.
Yeah, even from the marketing... That everyone assumed John Harrison was someone else, and a lot of them said it was Khan, and JJ and all of them lied about it and said it wasn't, and it was one of those weird, like, the only reason there's tension here is because you've hidden something. There's no tension really between these characters, and like there's things that are fun about that movie. There's things that are like interesting to watch. We're gonna get to it when we get to 2009 Star Trek, but.
Yeah.
The thing about this movie, to me, that's so weird is just how little like Star Trek it feels to me.
I don't know that it doesn't necessarily not feel like Star Trek, but it feels like it's trying to reference Star Trek. So, it feels...
it feels referential of Star Trek for sure. But
it's just
the action.
It's so bizarre.
There's no, and Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan is similar. It's an action story where you've got a bad guy and you've got a good guy, and they're facing off. That's what it is, and that's fine. Yeah. That's what this is too, except without his personal history, there's nothing sort of morally complicated about it. There's no like Captain Kirk questioning himself about like, did he do the right thing? There's no like the sins of your past being revisited upon you. Like all those themes are lost, and it just feels flat.
Like I like that like Kirk figures out like where Khan is going to hit because all of them are gathered there in that building. kind of feels like there should have been more security in that building. If like all of the fleet's major captains and first officers were there, and I don't know, man, there's just so much stuff that's just kind of floating around that makes me just kind of go, gosh, that could have been explained. Like, Khan should exist, should have looked like Ricardo Montalban. All right.
Yeah, that's true. They should have explained that he had to get like reconstructive surgery so that people didn't know him or something.
And I think that was the implication, but they just said that he was, undercover or whatever. They didn't say, like, and the worst thing is, like, I don't feel like, when Peter Weller gets the kibosh, when Khan basically crushes his frickin' skull and takes over the Vengeance, he has no reason to turn on Kirk the way he does. He sends them back to the Enterprise because no ship should go down without their captain. Why, dude? This dude was just helping you. Why are you trying to kill him now? I don't understand. Like, they just made him into such a vicious piece of shit, and I don't feel like the original Khan was that way.
The original Khan was that way, but he was that way specifically toward Kirk because Kirk had done him wrong.
Well, yes, but it was because Kirk gave him a world in the original series.
I know.
And then he went off the chains because he blamed him for his wife's death. And he did try to kill Kirk in Space Seed, but he was trying to get the ship. Like, it was all about his people and the preservation of his people. So he had his freaking people in the darkness.
Sure, you could say that, but it's also at the end. I mean,
he's into superiority and all that shit. But
it's just pure spite. Well, at that point, everyone's dead, and it's just him from Hell's Heart. I spit at thee. All that. That's my favorite thing, man. I love that.
I'm just trying to like run back to like Space Seed and say, like, how vicious was he? Yes, he was pretty vicious. He was willing to kill Kirk and try to take Kirk's crew and his ship, but it was for his people. Like,
right. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, in Space Seed, not so much. I'm thinking. I was like, you're talking about Wrath of Khan.
And he had the violent tendencies and whatnot. But, that's part of the genetic engineering. But in Into Darkness, they don't even give him a motivation. He has everything he wants, and he has the Vengeance. Why is he, like, going to destroy the Enterprise? It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just... and also there's the whole thing where Bones is running around screaming at Kirk. Like, 2 or 3 times in the movie, he tells him that his vitals are way off. They never address what that is. Oh, they show you the gun, they never fire it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's weird.
That is a weird movie. I don't remember that part at all. All right, number 9. You want to go first? What you got?
2009 Star Trek.
Oh, right there next to Into Darkness. Why 2009 Star Trek? Why is it down in number 9?
It is wildly entertaining, but also it's thin, and that's the worst I can really give it. It's thin. It doesn't really adhere to a lot of the ways Starfleet works that we've seen before, which is fine. It's an alternate universe. It's just it's a lot of fun, and there is a lot more depth to it than maybe I thought on the second or third, because I really loved it the first time I watched it, but then you sour a bit, and then you go back and you go, well, that was pretty good. You just it's a tough nut to crack, man, because it's a different universe, and it's a paradigm shift for the franchise, a franchise that you love, and you're like, well, it couldn't continue like Nemesis, but
yeah, it needed to change.
This is weird. This is different.
Yeah, for me, it's just 2009, and we'll talk about it when we get to my ranking. But to me, it's not very. It doesn't feel like Star Trek. There's no meat on that movie.
I think there's
that is a
meat.
Big problem.
There's meat, but it takes so many shortcuts getting to where it needs to be that it falls flat for me in a lot of ways, and it also feels cheap. Like story-wise.
Right. It definitely feels cheap. It definitely feels like
not budget-wise, because good lord,
no, it's a beautiful movie, and that's why I think it is higher on. One of the reasons it's higher on the list for me.
It is at number 9. almost entirely because of Michael Giacchino's score.
Oh, you think it's bad?
No. I love his score. I love his music. His music made it feel more like, if it wasn't for that score, it would probably be way lower on the list.
Interesting. I think part of why it's higher on my list is purely for personal reasons. Which
Really?
That goes for all these, there's personal reasons behind it. But for me, that movie just reignited my excitement about Star Trek again, in a way that I hadn't felt since 2002. And I thought it was over. I didn't know if they'd ever do Star Trek well again. And while I had big problems with 2009 Star Trek, man, we got all our friends together. We all went to see it. Like, it just felt like it was a really exciting thing. And I know that's not the fault of the movie, how good or bad the movie was, but I still have a lot of affection for how fun that movie was as just a ride. It's just a really fun Star Trek ride. And then, but to me, it lacks substance. So,
in a lot of ways, I view the 2009 Star Trek as a New Orleans funeral. Like, it was bittersweet because it was really cool and really exciting to see all this stuff and all of these, like, hey, here's like the highlights of the thing that you've loved all these years, but also this signals the death of the thing that you've loved all these years. It will never be the same again.
I felt the exact same way when they came out with the most recent Star Wars. And the J.J. Abrams reboot, not the most recent, but the J.J. Abrams version of Star Wars that came out. They both felt completely thin to me, and I purely felt like, well, they've set the stage with a fun movie. They got us back into this universe. What's next? And with Star Trek, the next thing was Into Darkness, and it was very disappointing. But for about 3 years, I was really excited about Star Trek. I was like, what's the next thing going to be? This one that was fun. And I understand you had to get all the characters into place, and that's basically what this movie was. And you did it in a fun and entertaining way. Yeah. Now, what are you going to give me? What's the meat on the bone after all this fun? And it just, there wasn't any to me. Into Darkness didn't perform. But for me, 2009 did, so. My number 9 is Search for Spock.
Okay.
Mostly because I have very little impression of this movie. I've seen it multiple times, and that's part of the problem. I grew up watching this movie. I definitely have seen this. This is one of the ones I've seen probably more than the others, and it's still... It is the beginning of the Marvel problem.
Oh, okay. Explain that to me. What do you mean?
Character death has no meaning. It's like killing Spock in the second Star Trek movie is a big deal. That's a huge thing. And I realize they give you the teaser at the end of Star Trek 2 that, oh, look at this. Look, it's on the fancy growth planet. But it still feels like it is sort of undoing some of the work of the them losing Spock, and I don't generally like constantly bringing back characters that are killed off, and it's probably one of the biggest. It's probably one of the original cases of that in a large budget movie like this, and so it's kind of the original sin for that for me. But in general, I just, like I said, don't have a huge impression of the movie. Like, I think about it and I'm like, I missed Kirstie Alley, being in it. I liked her better as the Vulcan lieutenant.
She demanded more money and they just weren't going to do that.
Right. I think that's part of it. I think the whole movie may feel a little underserved to me, a little cheaper maybe. I don't know. I didn't like Search for Spock nearly as much as I like Wrath of Khan. Although the one shining spot for me is Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, I love Christopher Lloyd. Yeah.
Love Christopher Lloyd in that movie. So, seeing him as the Klingon throughout, I that's the thing when I watch that movie. I'm like waiting on those scenes. So that's there for me. Yeah, we're getting into like, I feel like all controversial territory because everything from now on like is good. Is good. Are good movies in some respects.
Yeah.
What do you got at number 8?
Star Trek Generations.
Me too.
Really?
How are we doing that?
It ranks pretty high. Like I feel like 8 is high for
Ding,
generations.
ding.
8 is high for generations because the story doesn't make any sense. But
why not?
it doesn't make any sense because of when Picard, like, it's just so much horseshit. First of all, like,
yeah, it's contrived as hell for sure. I don't know if it doesn't make sense, but it's contrived as hell for sure.
It's like, oh, there's a ghost of Guinan stuck in the Nexus, and he can go exactly to the place and get Kirk, and then Kirk's just, from his perspective, he's just gotten there. That's all fun, but then we pull back, like, oh, they're just gonna go and stop Soren from destroying the star. They're not going to go and, like, I don't know, save Picard's family from burning to death in a fire that he was just crying about like 45 minutes ago. The whole plan of, send back my engineer but send me down to the planet. What? Like, why would the Klingons agree to that? Why would Picard suggest that? Like, the only thing that would make sense for the Klingons to do is to beam Picard over and use him as a prisoner, as a hostage, because he's one of the fleet's greatest, captains, and he's got all these codes in his head. No, send me down to the surface, and you can have me, but I'm going to go down to the surface, and you send me the engineer back that you just tortured. Oh, okay. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I don't even remember that.
And it's the very beginning of what I refer to as the first contact problem, but it's really the Generations problem, where, Picard goes down and he's a badass, and he's running around fighting another old man, like Malcolm McDowell, by the way, awesome. And he's another reason that the movie gets ranked so high. Time is a predator that stalks us all our lives. Like, yeah,
I do like him.
I love that shit. I love Data's storyline where he's coping with his emotions and he can't control it, and he doesn't know how to be a proper Starfleet officer without control of his emotions. I love that.
Yeah,
but the story doesn't make sense, and I didn't see a need for them to destroy the Enterprise D. I know why they did it, because it's almost impossible to film this son of a bitch. Like, it's hard to get a really good angle on it. Like, it is a really terrible model to film with.
Interesting.
And damn it, they needed stakes. They needed stakes. And part of the problem was, Ronald D. Moore and Brandon Braga were writing that at the same time that they were writing the final episode of Next Generation. One of them was going to suck more. Mm-hmm. Generations was it.
Yeah. One thing that I do like about them killing off the Enterprise D is, I like the technological advancement of the Enterprise, and I really like the Enterprise E. It was an exciting time to be a Trekkie when First Contact drops and you got this new Enterprise to see. I really enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. And it is a beautiful ending, so when you see, I think one of the last shots of Generations is Picard walking around the dilapidated Enterprise bridge. It's mm-hmm. nice, like, it's a nice little bookend for that story, kind of. And I don't know,
sort of.
I do like that, but for the most part, it just feels super contrived. I'm realizing a lot of these lower ones, Search for Spock, Generations, Into Darkness, the motion, and less the motion picture, but Nemesis, like, all four of these bottom six for me are all just super contrived. Like Search for Spock. Well, we killed Spock. Oh, we didn't mean to. Let's, like, have an entire movie where we get him back. Generations. We need to come up with an idea to combine the two crews. Nemesis. Mm-hmm. Let's create a reason for there to be an evil Romulan Picard. Like, it just all Into Darkness. Let's come up with a different Khan and have him still have a beef with Kirk. Yeah. They just feel like. It all feels like fan fiction to me. Like, all four of those movies feel like fan fiction to me.
Okay.
It doesn't feel like there's an original idea in the bunch.
Now, there's stuff in Generations that, breaks my heart. I love, like, just his nephew dying, his brother dying, oh my God. It's just this.
Yeah, that's awful stuff.
And I give a lot of credit to Patrick Stewart for making that shit work. I give a lot of credit to William Shatner for making his shit work too. Like, what did it get me? An empty house. Oh, just that's rough, man. Like when the Nexus, when he realizes, when he's looking back on his life and realizing that he kept going back to Starfleet and it just robbed him of an actual life. Mm-hmm. That's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you. It really is. Number 7 for me, moving on down the list, is Insurrection. I can't really defend it against the barbs that you had against it earlier. I think some of that is I haven't seen it in 20 years or whatever.
They were spindly barbs.
But it just, we're entering a section of my list that I just call expanded episodes. And Insurrection to me just felt like an expanded episode, so it ended up in the middle of my list. Like, those others all felt like fan fiction or like trying to expand an episode and ending up in a really bad place for me. Like, and this one did not feel like it ended up in a bad place. It also didn't feel like it ended up in the scale of what a movie deserves. Mm-hmm. It's a weird line to walk with Star Trek movies, because you need it to feel original and not like fans, too much fan service. You have to have an original idea, but you also have to make it feel bigger than an episode, so it has to have some sort of epic scale to it. And this one, I think, fails on that. It fails on it being that epic of a scale, but it succeeds at just sort of being a good Star Trek episode to me. But, on a rewatch, I may feel totally differently.
Yeah.
What's your number 7?
My number 7 is Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Ah, okay.
And I feel like I have to put it in the middle, because while it is very slow. It is a very slow movie. It is also, it's near and dear to my heart. And for some reason, I feel like I really love indie movies, and I feel like this was just a very expensive independent movie.
I don't know why you feel that way.
Because of how slow and pretentious it is.
Okay. Yeah. See, that does not. To me, it's just before they knew how to make blockbusters. To me, this is not. It doesn't feel like an independent movie. It seems like it feels like a mishandling of a big budget movie.
No, they wanted to be both Star Wars and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they failed at both. Gotcha. Like, that's what happened. Well, a lot of things happened. Like, they were over budget and out of time. Like, they literally finished the last cut, and people were in the theater waiting to see it.
Wow.
Like, while they were finishing the last cut and rushing it in, like, that's how bad Robert Wise was trying to get this thing in. Like, it was a rough situation. And let us not forget this movie was risen from the ashes of a TV series. Like, they were doing a TV series called Phase 2, and they still had the crew members working on it, and then they canceled it without telling the crew members so they could start working on the motion picture, which was the pilot. They just reworked the script from the pilot, which was called The God Thing. So anyway, motion picture, there's a lot to it that I really like. I really love the crew coming back together. It does very much feel like a pilot. For a sequel series or something. But, one of the things that really bothers me about the movie is that it begins a certain problem in the Star Trek universe. They did it in Star Trek The Motion Picture. They did it in Star Trek 3/Star Trek 4. And they did it again in Star Trek Insurrection. Which is they reset one of their most popular characters and never let them truly grow. Over the course of the original series, we saw Spock become more and more familiar with humanity and more comfortable showing his emotions around Kirk and McCoy. All right. You can jump in any point on the original series and you're not going to be too, thrown off by anything. But by the end of that show, he was not the emotionless dick that he was at the beginning of that show. So the first thing they do in motion picture which they didn't even know they were going to have Spock for a minute. But the first thing they do is they go, oh, well, what is the thing that everybody knows, every general audience member knows about Spock? He's emotionless. So they write in a conceit that he has undergone the Kolinar discipline, and now he has purged himself, or very nearly purged himself of all human emotions. He had to quit because he could feel this great, entity in space, V'Ger, and he was feeling emotions from it, so he couldn't accept the honor of the Kolinar. But he was still like reset basically to the initial stages of
like
the original series.
Reset thing.
Yeah, like where he was just very cold, very emotionless, admiral, doctor, blah, blah, blah. Over the course of, number 2, we come back and it's some 12 years later in the canon or whatever, and he's, back to about where we left him in the original series, where he's, exaggerating / lying, he will be and always will, he has been and always shall be Kirk's friend. He dies. He comes back for Star Trek 4. He's at factory settings.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand anything that McCoy is trying to say to him. He doesn't.
Yeah. And they do the same thing with Data and Nemesis. Like it is a problem they do.
So that's the thing that I hate.
I really hope that's not what Picard is about. Oh man, that'll be upsetting if like Data is they bring Data back, however, through B4 or through whatever, and he's just factory settings Data.
Well, from what I'm seeing of 7 of 9, it's not what it is.
Oh yeah,
I mean she's acting like a person.
Oh yeah, no, 7 of 9 for sure. I just mean who Data's going to be.
No, yeah, but motion picture, it's a gorgeous movie. I really I like slow moving scenes. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Like, it was a conceit, like this sort of, or this sort of plot, I should say, was really a thing that they did in the original series a few times.
Right.
So it's a little old hat there, but I really, I enjoy it for what it is.
I think for me, part of the problem with like the better of the older Star Trek movies have really good enemies. And I don't feel like this one does. I think that's part of the problem, because like this is, Wrath of Khan's like a few years later, and it's not that much faster paced, but it's so tense because you really fear Khan. And those dramatic readings of Shakespeare and stuff, like all that stuff is really cool and exciting, and in this, I feel like V'Ger is just he's a robot that's there to destroy humanity, and it just feels a little weirdly mustache twirly and emotionless, Well,
I don't feel like it's mustache twirly personally. I think there's an execution here that wasn't followed through on completely, but there's an idea that I really like, that V'Ger was the byproduct of the hubris of man. All right. We never thought that V'Ger would go off, learn so much, and then forget where it came from, essentially, but still come back looking for its creator and think that we were infesting Earth. There's something really cool about that. And I like the theme of, the hubris of man, because you also have Kirk, who is so desperate to get back his command, he's going to, kick Decker out of his seat. He doesn't know the Enterprise nearly as well as Decker does. And he almost destroys the Enterprise because he doesn't know how the systems work. He's giving orders, and Decker's like, belay that order, and I love all of that character interplay. I love how Bones is just on Kirk's dick the entire time. He just like, what the hell are you doing? Yeah, of course he's right. You were going to destroy the ship. I love the characters enough that it's a lot of fun to see them come back and kind of catch up. And I'll say this, like this scene sticks with me probably more than any Star Trek scene, when Rand is beaming up the first officer and that other person, and some malfunction in the transporter happens, and they dissolve and they die screaming inside of the transporter. And and Kirk takes over so it'll be on his shoulders, and he still can't save them. And as they die, he just quietly says, "Oh my God," and looks at Rand and says, there was nothing you could have done. Like, that is like one of the most horrific things I've ever seen in a movie, and I can't believe that movie was rated G.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing it again and seeing a different version of it, but I'm, not in love with it as it stands. Okay. Where are we now? Number 6?
Yeah.
This is my next one that is, to me, and it feels like an expanded episode, and that is Star Trek Beyond.
Oh, okay.
It feels like a really good Star Trek episode to me. Mm-hmm. Like, they land on a planet, there's a thing that happened, it's an old crew, the whole thing just feels very organic, it feels like a new idea, but it also feels big enough to be a movie, but it does just feel like a plot of an episode instead of being, I guess all of that big planet being at risk or whatever, that big city being at risk. At least that's why it's probably definitely above Insurrection for me. It's well executed. It's good. It's obviously got a lot of care for Star Trek, but it doesn't feel like a fan fiction.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's number 6 for me. What you got at number 6?
Right. Star Trek 3, the Search for Spock. As you touched on, I love Christopher Lloyd as Krug. Just absolutely love him. He's so good. I love Kirk just saying screw it and stealing the Enterprise and
that's
confirming for us what we've all suspected all along. They really don't need all those other crew members to fly that ship. The more you overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain, man. I love Scotty, sabotaging the Excelsior and pissing off Doogie Howser's dad.
Yeah, it's true. In that movie and in a lot of the earlier Trek movies, all the characters feel like they're given a lot of respect, and they all do what they do well. You were talking about 5 not doing that, and 3 does feel like it really maintains that.
Yeah. I love McCoy having his Katra, and they did build that into Star Trek 2, so it's not like they just kind of manufactured that out of thin air.
Yeah.
And it's fun. Because they looked at they saw the test screenings, and they're like, we may have screwed up here. We need to add some hope for Spock at the end of this thing. And already Nimoy was going, I'm not sure I want to die now. I only signed on so I could, but now I don't know. This feels weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love Star Trek 3. I love the Vulcan mysticism. I like Robin Curtis. She's serviceable in the role of Saavik, which it doesn't sound great, but she didn't, ruin it by any stretch. I love that they find a young, tortured Spock who doesn't understand anything, and he's just like an empty shell experiencing all this pain from the seismic growth of the Genesis planet. I love seeing the aftermath of the Wrath of Khan. I love that David tried to he's so much like his father, like Saavik says. I didn't even mean to do that. I realized as I was saying it, she says, so much like your father. He was so impetuous that he skipped some steps, and oh man, he used protoplasm or something shouldn't have, or something, and the Genesis planet is unstable. And I love the serialization of Star Trek 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, I love that too. Yeah, that's a good, if I'd really thought about it, 3 functions so well as the middle point of that trilogy. I do think it's great for that.
And I love that they get Spock back, but he loses his son that he just started getting to know again. It's so heartbreaking. Shatner does a fantastic job reacting to it, and it sets up future installments. I dig Star Trek 3 quite a bit, and it's not as exciting as Star Trek 2, and it's not as fun as Star Trek 4. I think it gets kind of a bad rap, unfairly, because I think oh my God, McCoy, in prison with the Katra, and he's like, that green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost. And like Kirk putting up the Vulcan hands, the Vulcan hands thing, and going, I can't even say it. I don't even know what it is now. And saying, "Doctor, tell me how many fingers am I holding up?" That's not very damn funny. I love how the crew shines in that movie, and I just dig it. I like it a lot. I'm with you.
I think it's a really good one. It does not get the, everyone always does all the evens are good, all the odds are bad, which like, I think there's some truth to it. I think there's like, some of the best ones are even, some of the worst ones are odd, but Star Trek 3 is definitely an outlier in that it's definitely not bad. It's not as iconic as Wrath of Khan or Voyage Home, but it's really good.
Yeah.
All right. Number 5? Is that where we are?
Yeah.
I have 2009.
Okay.
2009, the reboot.
We kind of talked about that a lot when we set it for number 9.
We did. So I have it number 5. We can keep moving. Again, it's very high on my list, but the main reason it's high on my list is where it functioned in my life. And just like, it gave me so much hope for the future of Star Trek, even though, like, because there's nothing in there I don't like. It just doesn't have some of the depth I wanted. So,
yeah,
it didn't have like a lot of dings against it, like a Nemesis or something. But like,
ding ding,
ding ding. But it isn't as. It doesn't have as much bad going for it. It just doesn't have that much good going for it either, kind of. Like, except some of those actors really pull it off. They really pull off those roles. And they do a good job of bringing back. They did a good job setting the stage, but then I just think Into Darkness kind of shit the bed. So,
yeah.
I like 2009 Star Trek.
Yeah.
What you got at number 5?
I've got Star Trek Beyond.
Okay.
I really enjoy Star Trek Beyond a whole lot. It's a lot of fun, like the previous 2 installments, but it actually feels a lot more like Star Trek than they do, and
yeah,
it actually makes sense from a storytelling standpoint. I love all the references to Enterprise. I love Idris Elba as Krall. Oh my gosh, I really enjoy a lot of the crew interaction. They kind of sidelined the Spock Uhura relationship basically by ending it for the entirety of the movie, and I would assume I think they got back together at the end of that. But and they focused on Spock and McCoy. We had a lot of fun with those two together, and I think that was missing in the previous 2 installments. Or I felt like it was anyway. But I felt like there was some good Scotty stuff here, and probably because Simon Pegg wrote the damn thing. And Justin Lin did a fantastic job directing it. I really love seeing Kirk question his place in Starfleet at the same time our main villain is doing everything he's doing because he found himself at a similar place where, he was a Mako and they disbanded after the Xindi and Romulan Wars. Love those name checks, by the way.
Yeah, it's great.
And he finds himself the captain of a ship and he's like, what the hell am I? And then once they crash, Starfleet, the Federation's nowhere to be found. I just love all of that. I love how Kirk is like just through the rigors of checking out gaseous anomalies out in the middle of space. He's going on these like tedious adventures and diplomatic missions. He's just like, what am I doing here, man? Like, what is this? Do I really want to do this? And they kind of sped it up as this universe does, where he's in line to get the vice admiralty. I didn't quite believe that, but it was kind of cool. They jumped ahead like 3 or 4 years. I dug it. I liked Pine. I think his performance showed a lot of maturity. It rang pretty solid for me, and especially heart-wrenching. I love the subtlety of saying goodbye to Leonard Nimoy. The Vulcans meeting Spock at Yorktown and pulling him aside and saying, hey, Ambassador Spock died. And they don't even say it. We just see Spock looking sad and saying, thank you for telling me. And then he tells McCoy, he finally breaks the silence, tells McCoy on the planet when he's about to die. And at the end, we see him look at the classic picture of the movies, of the original crew, and just looking at that life that could have been. I don't know, man. It was just they played with my emotions a little bit, but I think it was probably the most solid Star Trek since 1996.
Is that where you're going next?
It might be, man.
It might be. All right. Well, what is next? What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Star Trek First Contact.
All right. I dig it. Why does it rank at number 4?
Well, look, I love the dude who plays Zefram Cochrane in this thing, for one.
Yeah, Zefram Cochrane's
James Cromwell.
A lot of fun.
I love Alfre Woodard. She does a fantastic job. Just getting that out of the way. I feel like this movie saved the Borg for me. Because by the time we got to, what was it, like the last appearance, I think was, Descent? Something like that. I think that was it. The Borg had fallen flat for me. I was just sort of like, yeah, all right. Cyborg zombies. What the hell ever.
Right.
Once you got past like the Picard of it all and the Hugh of it all and the more dilemma of it all, and then First Contact sort of pulls that back a little bit, but I really like this idea that Picard has been just masking the fact that he can hear them the whole time, like, because they hadn't really brought that up. I don't think, and I'd have to do a rewatch of TNG, and I plan to, but I love that he can hear them. I love that they put a face to the Borg in the Borg Queen. I know it flies in the face of the concept of the Borg, but I really like the Borg Queen and thought it gave some complexity to that villain.
Yeah, having just a good actress play her gave a chance for a great performance and a chance for some scenes where we really got into the mind of the Borg, as it were, or the minds or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, and it built on what Generations did with Data and evolved him further, tempted him in the bowels of the ship, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
I loved Riker in this thing. For God's sake, that's a strange entity. That's the Riker that I love. Like, what the hell?
Freaking Worf on the outside of the ship fighting Borg. Love that. I love him coming back after you think he's dead. I love that he comes back with like a Borg arm tied around his suit to or something. Like, it's like, that's good Worf stuff. And like, I love when he demagnetizes his boots to jump over the Borg and then land. Like, it's so silly. It's all so silly, but like somehow it works in that one. I don't know if it's just because they're just young enough to make it work.
I don't know. I think it's a little more subtle. Like, there's enough playing emotionally. Picard's white whale and the explosive tension between Lily and Picard. Jean-Luc, blow up the damn ship. No. He's just so unwilling to lose another ship. So unwilling to lose it to the Borg of all things. Like, I just love it, man. It's few flaws. First Contact fires on all cylinders with the entire crew. Yeah. Like, we get every bit of what we love about the Next Generation crew. We get those shining character moments. We even get a really nice scene with a doctor from Voyager, who, yes, is probably one of the best parts of Voyager. I love that dude. I love Robert Picardo. And I think it's a really entertaining, crafted film.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it gets unfairly criticized as just being like a zombie movie in space or just an action movie, and it's not.
No,
it's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, it is, and it has a lot of depth. And I love all the stuff about what makes a great man. With Zefram Cochrane and how he's not living up to who he could be, and it kind of takes the interaction with the future and all of that he has to like step up, and I think all of that's a lot of fun. I really love that movie. It's obviously higher on my list. So let's see. For me, that was your number 4, right?
Yeah.
My number 4 is Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. To be honest, this is one that I've seen a number of times, and I just always think how solid it is, and just really, really a good movie. It's well acted. It's well, it's well plotted, and it's a cool like mystery story. Combined with lots of interesting themes. I just like Star Trek VI a lot. And I think you'll probably have more to say on it because I think that's one of your favorites. So I think it'll probably, obviously it's a little higher on the list. So, that's all I'll say on it. What I was going to say is, to be honest, I don't have as strong of a memory of that one as I do some other ones, except for every time I watch it, I'm just like, man, that's good. Man, that's good. So made it up high on my list.
Yeah.
My number three is just a really fun movie, Star Trek: The Voyage Home.
That's my number 3.
Ding, ding.
I've created a monster.
I think that's the last time we're going to ding, so I had to get it in there. Oh,
yeah,
maybe not. Maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't know. Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. It's a little heavy-handed in its, an environmental message, but that's fine. And I think I like the approach to it. I like the idea that an alien species would come over to our planet to be like, hey, what happened to Bill? We were talking on the phone, and all of a sudden, he's not responding anymore. Like, I like the idea that this, like, we don't know what the whales are saying. No, they can't communicate. Bullshit. They're communicating with aliens.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's, people say it's silly, but I don't know. That's just on the cusp of just silly. It's a little silly, but just realistic enough that I'm like, that's kind of a cool idea. I dig that.
I didn't think, and I have to go back and watch it, but I never got the point that they were actively communicating with aliens. I thought the idea was they just sent a probe to go back and talk to the whales. Because that probe arrives or whatever, and it reaches out to listen for whales, and they're missing, and then tries to do what it's doing or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't get that they were talking to aliens in like a any kind of like current way. Like, yeah, I thought
that's what McCoy has a line in there. Like, Spock has a line about how human hubris would suggest or would convince us that the signal was meant for us, and as if we were the higher form of life or whatever. And then you have McCoy, and one of my favorite bits in the film where he's like, "So we're hoping to go back and get some humpback whales and hope to hell that they'll." Tell this probe what to go do with itself. Yeah, they were having a conversation with the whales. Like, we still don't know what the whales at the time of extinction. We didn't know what the whales were saying, what the whale songs were meant for. They were talking to these aliens. I
just realized something.
What's that?
It has to be a thing. It has to be a reference. So the guys who made Star Trek Avengers Endgame, they're big Star Trek fans. They said they drew a lot of inspiration for Endgame from Star Trek All Good Things, the final episode of Next Gen. So I'm just realizing that when Captain America walks in, spoiler alert, I guess, for Endgame, if you've been living under a rock. Not a big spoiler, though. He walks in and says, "I just saw 2 humpbacks in the bay." That has to be a Star Trek reference, right? Because
I would think so.
The movie is about them going back in time to pick something up to bring to the future to use to save the planet.
And they take them to the San Francisco Bay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That has to be a reference to Star Trek, and I didn't catch it. And
that's
now
funny.
I'm realizing that's beautiful. That's great. Beautiful reference.
That's great.
Oh, I love it.
I didn't think about it either.
I didn't either. I'm getting chills because I know those guys love Star Trek. And that they were already drawing inspiration. And the movie is a very similar plot to Star Trek 4 in that they're going back in time to pick something up.
That's nice, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh, man.
So, yeah, Star Trek 4, classic fish out of water story. I love it. I love the humor of it. I think it's funny. There's just so much I could quote when they bring Jillian in to the pretending to be doctors, and they come out with Chekhov, and the cops are like, "Wait a minute! When you went in there, it was a woman." And Kirk just mutters, "One little mistake," and they just start running away with Chekhov.
Spock's cursing in the movie is a lot of fun.
Double dumbass on you.
I still, there's one line in this movie that I quote almost every day. Almost every single day. When I wake up and go to answer emails, I go, "Hello, computer." Almost every day. Yep. So, yeah, that's a great one. Voyage Home belongs high on our lists.
Yeah.
So, number 2. I'm curious if we have the same number 2 or different number 2s.
Okay.
Number 2. You want to go same time? See if it's the same?
Sure.
Number 2. 3, 2, 1. Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we're on the same boat. Well, ding fucking ding then.
I hate you, man.
Double ding to
/ love you.
Double ding to you.
One damn hour, Admiral.
All right. So, Wrath of Khan, eh?
Wrath of Khan. Yeah, I mean, how could you not?
Yeah, a lot of people belongs near the top.
Yeah, I love it. Unabashedly says the best one. It's pretty damn close. Classic story of revenge. My big qualm, I think the reason it's not number 1 for me is just because, I mean, yeah, you could say Khan's been driven insane by being on Steady Alpha for that long, but, you know, dude, just not, like, you accepted the terms of going to that world in Space Seed. It was not on Kirk's shoulders to come check up on you, as he says in Wrath of Khan. Like, your Admiral Kirk never came to check up on us. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would he check up? You said you would rather reign in hell than, serve in heaven or whatever. Mm-hmm. And now you're like pissed because your wife died. And it's Kirk's fault. I think that's like my biggest problem. Like, his superior intellect just like falls apart on that.
Well, superior intellect doesn't lead to emotional competency, you know.
I know.
Like, or being willing to accept the blame for your wife's death, or like that's the thing. That movie's about him not being able to accept what has happened to his people, and he needs a scapegoat even in his own mind, you know? Yeah. Because if in Space Seed he had been willing to serve in heaven or whatever, like, maybe his people wouldn't have died.
Yeah. Which, by the way, this Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan has the best Kirk line of all time. Maybe the best line in any Star Trek movie. And it is not Kirk screaming Khan.
No, it's 1 minute Khan.
That is pretty good.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite Kirk line.
My favorite Kirk line is Kirk quietly leans over into the comm and he says, "Khan, I'm laughing at the superior intellect."
Oh yeah, that's good. That's real good.
Oh, you son of a bitch. You know that's what's going to get him really upset.
The way that he plays Khan in that movie, that's exactly what I'm referencing earlier. When I don't want to see my crew tumbling around under the bowels of the ship fighting vampires. I really want to see them playing with the enemy the way that Kirk plays with Khan. Like that's what I want to see from my captain. And we do in Wrath of Khan. It's just so good.
And it's a believable. I feel like it's a believable flaw in Khan's thinking that they exploit his 2-dimensional thinking. Like,
I love that.
That's a really clever turn. Because otherwise, I'm like, how the hell are they beating Khan? He's totally superior. Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dig it. I like the changes they made when they after the screenings. They were right to throw in that hope for Spock. That's one of the few instances where I think like they knew they suddenly realized, oh shit, we're gonna make a huge mistake if we actually kill Spock.
Yeah. Well, and I think oftentimes it's the right thing to do to keep a character around. Like that is definitely the case. But I don't like the emotional manipulation of killing a character when you know you're just going to bring him back.
Well, but here's why it works in Wrath of Khan. This is why it still works. Kirk doesn't know that we're going to bring him back. This is the first time Kirk is like really specifically facing death. He's cheated death, and he's patted himself on the back for his own ingenuity. He's never experienced a loss.
Right.
Not
it's
like
the emotional.
this.
Well, see, that's the thing, and he still cheats death in the next movie. You know?
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Sort of.
Like I said, this is the original sin of that sort of a trope.
But he doesn't cheat death in the next movie because his son dies. His ship dies. Like,
right. Well, but then he has the same ship back.
Well, it's not the same ship.
Yeah,
if you recall, in Star Trek V, the thing barely worked.
Sure.
Scotty says, "Let's see what she's got." The captain says, "Well, we found out, didn't we?"
Right. It's still it's still him had never really learning to deal with loss.
His son never came back.
No, his son
David
never comes
is
back,
dead.
but he also didn't know his son very long. Like, not that that's he's never lost something that he truly like loved and was a part of his life. I mean, obviously he does eventually, but yeah, it's part of his character though to be sort of brash in the face of death, and and that's it's definitely an interesting part of his character I really like. But okay. I'm going to go with my last one first because I think you're going to have more to say about yours. And to be honest, my last one, it's probably not obvious since we've said a lot of things on here, but is one that I will probably regret being my number one in this list. It will probably change, but I had to go with my gut on this one. A lot of them really were contenders for number one, but I had to go with First Contact.
Okay.
I just have such an affection for First Contact because, again, it's where I was in my life at the time, what I was doing. You know, it was my crew that I grew up watching every week as they came out. You know, like The Next Generation was kind of my crew at that point, and I was still excited about current Star Trek being DS9 on the air. I was loving all of that, and this was probably just the height of Star Trek for me as a youth. And, you know, First Contact's just a good movie. It's well executed. We did a big discussion about it a second ago. And let's go with your last one because we didn't say much about it when I said it. So, what's your number one, my friend?
Favorite Star Trek film of all time, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. As silly as it is, I love that the Klingons imply that Shakespeare was a Klingon.
Yeah, that's fun.
Like you've not experienced Shakespeare until you read him in the original Klingon. I love everything about the movie, and it was funny. I was talking to my wife about it because she asked me a few days ago when she found out we were going to be doing the show. She said, "What is your favorite Star Trek movie?" And I told her, and she's like, "I don't remember that one." And I started explaining it to her, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't remember that." And I'm like, "Oh, remember this and this happened?" She's like, "Was I in a coma?" I love the, you know, I love the parallels between with real life. I love that, you know, Praxis is like Chernobyl, and I just love the whole thing. I love Undiscovered Country. I love that the Klingons. We finally get an end to the most famous conflict. Resolution, I should say, really, to the most famous conflict in the franchise history. Everyone knows the Klingons are the enemies, and I love how it's so very Star Trek. And I've seen so many people say that Star Trek VI like spit on the legacy of Star Trek and spit on the characters because they're all racist. No, Star Trek VI shows you how easy prejudice can slip back in.
Yeah.
through conflict, through experience, through daily living. Through letting your emotions get the best of you. Kirk says, I've never trusted Klingons, and I never will. I can never forgive them for the death of my boy. Out of all of those years in the original series, that Cold War, because that's very much what the Klingons were. They were the Russians. Through the space opera Cold War between the Klingons and the Federation, Kirk has grown to distrust them, to hate them. The entire crew, the entire bridge crew talks shit about the Klingons. They don't like that they had to go to dinner with them. They don't like the way they ate. We have crewmen talking about the way they smell. It's rough, man, and I love it so much. Like, I love David Warner as Gorkon, Chancellor of the High Council. I love his dying breath as he embraces Kirk and says, "Don't let it end this way, Captain." Oh my gosh, it's just so good. And yeah, they have that cheesy thing that I hate in movies where the shapeshifter looks like the main character and it's like, no, I'm the real one. No, I'm the, but that, thankfully only lasts for a minute.
Yeah, but that actually, I know that's cheesy, but it also feels very Star Trek and very fun and silly and and I don't know, that doesn't bother me at all.
And it was Iman, and you have the great bit where she's telling Kirk the thing, you kicked that thing in the knees, but that wasn't his knees. Not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place, Captain.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man. I really enjoy the movie. I love that McCoy breaks, busts Kirk's balls over making out with Iman. What is it with you? He finally asks after all these years. What's going on with you, buddy? Why you have to kiss everybody? I love how everyone's prejudiced and they come to that realization that they were afraid of the future. They were afraid of what life would look like if they weren't constantly in conflict with the Klingons, if they actually called them friend. And
I love that. I love the resolution of that movie that it turns out that the people, there's enemies of peace that are working together on both sides. It's their hatred is so strong that they're willing to work with the enemy to keep hating the enemy.
Absolutely.
I loved that.
Yeah, and you remember the Klingon assassin was at Khitomer was when they took off the mask, it was freaking Colonel West, a.k.a. Odo, Rene Auberjonois.
Oh, funny. So, yeah, I'd forgotten that.
And he was in somebody. He was working in cahoots with General Chang and Admiral Cartwright, who played Sisko's dad later in DS9, but he was an admiral that we saw popping up in the movies since Star Trek 3 or 4.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that kind of stuff. It's very much reminds me of the Hydra reveal. Not to over-connect it to Marvel, but it reminds me of the Hydra reveal when you realize certain people you've known for a while now have been bad guys all along. You just didn't know.
Yeah.
That's all our rankings. You want to take a quick break and do the math on these and figure out what our combined ranking is?
Sure.
Cool. We'll be right back. All right, Dave, I've done the math on this here. We have two ties that we need to resolve, and I think I'm going to give them both to you.
Okay.
Our first tie is we have a tie for the motion picture and Insurrection. I think, given the case you made, I think I'm happy to let the motion picture stand ahead of Insurrection.
Okay.
Because I haven't seen it. Honestly, I'd probably give you most of these if they were tied because you just seen them all a lot more recently. And lastly, this one's less about you and more about me. We have a tie for The Undiscovered Country and First Contact. And I'm going to give you that one mostly because I don't trust myself. The other one's about trusting you. This one's about not trusting myself. And I love Undiscovered Country. I really do. But First Contact, even just thinking about it just almost sounds ridiculous to me. All of them running around doing what they do, fighting the Borg and jumping around off the outside of the ship and shit. It's also something I love so much, and I can't get too far away from it. I love it so much, I put it at the top, but I'm willing to let it sit at under Undiscovered Country.
Okay.
All
so
right.
what's the actual rankings?
Here's the
now
rankings
for both of us.
Number 13, Star Trek Nemesis.
No kidding.
Predictable. Number 12, Final Frontier, Star Trek V.
All right.
Number 11, Into Darkness.
Okay.
Number 10, Insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Number 9, The Motion Picture. Number 8, Generations.
I could live with that.
Number 7, Search for Spock.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, Star Trek 2009, the reboot.
Oh.
Number 5, Star Trek Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, The Voyage Home. Number 3, First Contact. This is getting confusing because I'm saying like number 3, okay. Number 2, The Undiscovered Country, Star Trek 6. And number 1, which neither of us put as number 1, but ended up there anyway because the world loves this movie. Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
I feel like putting Wrath of Khan at number 1 gives us a very basic bitch sort of ranking, but it ended up that way, even though neither of us chose it. That's funny.
Mm-hmm. That is kind of funny. Basic bitch understanding.
All right, guys. Well, that's our rankings of the Star Trek movies, and I'm really excited. We're very soon as possible, we're going to start a rewatch of these movies. It's going to take us a long time because we've got a lot of Star Trek coming that we need to talk about. But
there's a ton of news we haven't even discussed.
Oh yeah,
Picard's just around the corner.
Maybe, yeah. What I would love to do, if we can, is do a couple episodes about key Picard episodes.
Well, I think sadly Nemesis would be in. I think that's probably, if there was to be something that we should watch before the new show, that's probably going to be one of them, like the Borg episodes.
Yeah.
Including Brothers, which is sort of the aftermath of the Borg situation where he's like hanging out with Robert, and he has that breakdown in the vineyard. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Maybe even All Good Things, which I've recently watched, so I could probably talk about pretty unproblematically.
How many weeks do we have till Picard? Like,
hell, I don't know.
10 or 12, something like that. Maybe we should put a list together and try to do an episode a week where we talk about different Picard episodes for a few weeks.
Yeah, well,
I'd love to do that. So we'd have to make them short episodes. For those of you who don't know, we've talked about it on the cast before, but yeah, our schedules changed and we suddenly we have completely opposite work schedules now. So that's why these episodes have not been able to come out as fast. And because there's no current content, we've just kind of let it be dormant in the sort of the off season. But we're going to be here for the entire season of Picard as it comes out. So
we will be.
We'll be here.
We'll figure it out.
Oh yeah. All right, guys. Well, we are the Star Trek Universe podcast. Hit us up at STUcast. We don't have a website, do we?
StarTrekUcast.com, absolutely. And please come to Twitter.
Sorry.
God, what is wrong with you?
I didn't remember if we ever got the URL.
Ding, ding.
It's been a while. Ding, ding.
We would love it if you would, talk to us on Twitter, Star Trek Ucast over on Twitter, or at gmail.com, and let us know what your rankings are and what you thought. We'll absolutely put that into or include it in a future episode. Yeah,
we'll probably be doing a news episode next week, and we'll try to do any feedback about this. So let us know what your rankings are, or when we were completely crazy, if you thought our rankings were completely nuts.
Yeah, give us hell.
Give us hell. All right, guys.
From hell's heart.
All right, guys. Thanks for checking us out. Peace.
Live long and prosper, y'all.
To reach out to us, hit us up at StarTrekUcast.com, at StarTrekUcast on Twitter, or search for the Star Trek Universe Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And if you want to hear more from David C. Robertson, search for the DC On Screen podcast in your podcast app now, or go to maladjusted.tv for his comedy sketches. If you want to hear more from me, Matthew Carroll, search for the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or the Orville Universe podcast in your podcast app, or check out my music. Just search for Matthew Carroll wherever you listen to music.